Right about now is when people start getting tired of The Last of Us 2 leaks and controversy. I get that, and I feel I'm about to be in the same boat, honestly. However, before attempting to conclude my coverage on this, till the inevitable hurricane of launch day videos, I say attempting because one can truly never know what tomorrow holds. I mean, 2020 has had a viral pandemic, lockdowns, quarantines, UFO declassifications, Elon Musk is now selling all his earthly possessions, and the American presidential race is just unbelievable, truly. I can't tell what the hell is around the next corner. But anyways, before attempting to conclude my coverage of these leaks, I want to discuss a hypothetical that I have not seen anyone else focus on because if true, it would push the game beyond what it is perceived as now, which is speculatively a bad narrative with insufficient characters and a forced pandering agenda, over to something quite literally damaging to the future of video game development, and especially certain political ideologies. This is where we need absolute clarity and where I will also attempt as much nuance as possible. There are two hypotheticals in play here, and neither one is assured at this point in time. Hypothetical 1, and the option I will staunchly defend as more desirable, is that the leaks do not represent the final product accurately. It seems fairly certain that they represent key plot points in an accurate way, but what we are lacking is further context. There are a number of different things to consider with this option. For starters, due to the now colossal backlash that has exploded onto the internet, will Sony force top-down edits and delay the game? It's not unheard of, it is entirely plausible, but regrettably I feel it may be unlikely. Alternatively, we could be looking at a vertical slice of the narrative that deliberately excludes extremely powerful and emotional payoffs. There could very well be expertly crafted character development in there. I find it unlikely, I doubt it's there, and I hate to say that, but the potential does exist. There are a myriad of reasons why what has been exposed by these leaks might not be indicative of the fully rounded experience. Again, I doubt this option is true. I am fearful that there is no saving grace lurking behind the next bend and that we will be getting a narrative fleshed out around the leaked skeletal plot points that does nothing to diffuse the anger and animosity, but ultimately we cannot be certain. As much as people may claim in their anger, the whole game leaked, we know it's awful, we know it's going to be terrible from start to finish, that is hyperbolic based on very real frustration and fear, but extremely inaccurate. We do not know hardly anything. However, with an abundance of compelling evidence, it's hard not to make assumptions, and feel that those assumptions are, most likely, fairly on point. That's just the first hypothetical, the one that we should all want to be true, but that we must equally recognize is probably not true. The second hypothetical is what I will focus on for today. Keep in mind that from here on out, I am discussing a totally unknown scenario and making assumptions based on what the leaks contain. This could be wrong, things could change, new info could be revealed that invalidates these assumptions. But if all holds true, I believe that The Last of Us 2 might become a legitimately damaging force in the video game industry, which sets back the very same political agendas it seeks to push, through some of the most horrifically executed choices in all of gaming history. Now is when I will actually discuss the leaked content with relative detail. It's entirely possible that Sony or some demented corporate proxy strikes down my videos as a result of that. I will fight this tooth and nail. I will bring it to official litigation without hesitation. If you want to go that route, Sony, Naughty Dog, whoever it may be, fine. I will also attempt to organize with other YouTubers for a class action lawsuit, perhaps, should my content be struck in a damaging way. I just wanted to make that clear up front in case someone actually watches the videos before shutting them down. Weigh those odds carefully because I will deliberately make a mountain out of a molehill to prove a point against corporate DMCA abuse here. That said, once again, I'm about to summarize plot details from the leaks that will absolutely be considered spoilers. If you do not want to hear them, please click away. You have been warned. For those of you still here, let's dive in. The bulk of the anger I have seen revolves around three characters and their subsequent treatment: Abby, Ellie, and Joel. Abby is a seemingly transgendered antagonist-protagonist hybrid who is the child of a surgeon/doctor that Joel killed in the original game while rescuing Ellie. Ellie and Joel, they really don't need explanations, but for those who might not know, they are the characters from the first entry who were built upon over the span of many, many consecutive hours to a point of emblematic emotional investment in the entire industry. The basic plot appears to revolve around the concept of revenge. Abby is on a path of vengeance after her father was killed by Joel. This leads her to a pivotal scene where she does kill Joel with a golf club, while Ellie is forced to watch. That is the first major point of anger towards the narrative from what I have seen, and with good reason. After this, there is presumably a lengthy and not as of yet fully revealed story arc that fleshes out both Ellie and Abby, as well as their companions. This brings us to the second major point of anger, which is that about half of the game is played as Abby, the antagonist who killed Joel, and is projected to be an attempt at building her from a hated and abhorrent villain, somehow, to a character we actually care about in some way. I don't know how that would even be possible, but seemingly that is the goal. After this nebulous character building takes place, however that occurs, there is evidence of a fight between Abby and Ellie, while you, the player, control Abby and hunt down Ellie in a way very reminiscent of a particular fight from the first game. This appears to be the third section that has fans truly on edge. And then finally, you as Abby beat Ellie to within an inch of her life, and it has been massively speculated that you kill Ellie while playing as Abby, leading to a final realization that vengeance solves nothing. As Abby, and presumably you as the player, realize that the cycle will now continue, nothing was truly accomplished. That is effectively a summary of the most meaningful segments. There is more, such as the wonderful, and I truly mean wonderful, early cutscenes where Joel and Ellie are bonding in exactly the same way that we as fans have come to know and love, which means it's obviously possible for them to do here, they just chose not to for the majority of it. But the crucial and most infuriating portions that have set the fandom ablaze revolve around Abby killing Joel, you playing as Abby for half the game, hunting down and fighting Ellie while possibly killing her in the end. That's the spoilers, and that's as much as I will discuss in terms of leaked details, but hopefully it communicates where the anger has been coming from. Now, before continuing, I want to take a sort of intermission here because the topic is heavy under the best of circumstances, and tell you why I care so much about this franchise. About 2 years ago, give or take, that's a very general estimate right now, I was a streamer on Twitch. I went through various ups and downs, but during what I would probably call my peak enjoyment on the platform, the entire time, I played for the very first time The Last of Us with a large group of dedicated viewers who also appreciated the game and came with me for the ride. This was a phenomenal experience. Something clicked for me while slowly progressing through the game, witnessing the still burning enthusiasm that so many of the viewers in chat had, and to go even further, these were some of the best broadcasts I have ever had in my life in terms of many other factors. There were no trolls, no frustrations, no concerns. I enjoyed the game, the discussion, the slowly building atmosphere, and it felt like nothing at all, not a single thing, got in the way of that enjoyment. Streaming is kind of a highlight in my life that I would not trade for anything, and The Last of Us was a highlight of that streaming. So as a result, I have genuine feelings about this franchise. With that in mind, I desperately want this game to succeed and be everything that I hoped for it, but I will try to avoid my judgment becoming so clouded that I cannot see the iceberg off the bow. Assuming these leaks are accurate and assuming there is no more context to provide, though after careful consideration for the past couple of days, I have one speculative prediction I would like to add to the video that I will get to later on, which I can picture as a fitting and possibly redeeming narrative choice that might still be possible, but that's for later. Assuming there is no more context to give, and that what we see is the entirety of their pivotal plot decisions, plus the predictions on Reddit, 4chan, and Reset Era are correct on top of that, The Last of Us 2 will go down in history as one of the most brutally damaging games to ever release, and will be cited for decades as the reason behind future struggles for social justice credibility in the video game industry. That's a massive claim, so let me explain. We have been told now, by the very same crowd pushing the perceived agenda in this particular game, that tropes and stereotypes in video games and other pop culture have influential power. Whether or not you agree with this, it is integral to their entire premise of inflicting change upon the industry, because the effects of having certain characters in certain games with certain belief sets or identities, in their mind, it translates to real-world behavior. But this is a flawed foundation, and if believed, it turns The Last of Us 2 from a game that merely fails to appeal to its once supportive player base to a title that actively sabotages the apparent goal it had in the first place, which was to expand the acceptance of diverging sexualities, ethnicities, and character backgrounds in video games away from a somehow villainized white male majority. The first step here is to understand that character identity does not dictate viewer or player response in any meaningful way unless it is done poorly. Take comic books, for example. Previous comic book iterations that showed hyper-idealized characters did not spur their viewers to actively hate things that were not similar. The whole point of creating caricature perfection was to appeal to more people, not cause them to despise what is not even shown. When you read old Wonder Woman comics, for example, the response is, wow, she is amazing, not, wow, she's amazing, so therefore I hate all fat women. The only character or identity that viewers will develop impressions of is the identity of the character shown. Let's expand on this. The New Warriors have garnered nothing but ridicule from both the demographic that they represent and the demographics that they don't, because the characters themselves are bad. What would you rather see, this or this? One with her magic backpack, and the other with super strength, flight, and compelled truth, who blocks bullets with her wristbands and commands the respect of even Batman and Superman. You really think Snack Pack Dora is commanding Batman's respect? Really? You don't look at Snack Pack Dora and think, wow, I now hate all skinny white women. You see Snack Pack Dora and analyze what she is, not everything she isn't. Looking at her, you see a terrible superpower, a bad backstory, a lack of any meaningful ability to actually do anything impactful in a world dominated by supervillains and demons. She is effectively useless, and you judge her for it. That judgment is not redirected miraculously to some entirely separate character or identity that is not even in the comic. It is judgment aimed solely at her. So how does this relate to The Last of Us 2? Simple. Abby, the transgendered antagonist, protagonist, whatever she is, who abusively murders a character we as the viewer have loved for many years, is going to be the sole target of that rage and frustration. She might even murder Ellie for all we know, and describing the battle they have is troublesome because it truly feels like some sort of Spec Ops guerrilla is just beating up on a young girl, and you are controlling it during that process. It's disgusting. Now, pause, and I know I'm going off on a lot of tangents right now, but I promise it will all tie back in together in the end. Artistic creations do not necessitate positive emotional reactions. If we accept video games as artwork, and they are artwork indisputably, we must also recognize that they do not need to make us feel good by default. An example I have used in the past, and one that I find to be fitting again here, is the sculpture memorial at Dachau. Dachau is a labor camp from World War II, and it has memorialized the fallen with a twisted metal sculpture meant to depict bodies. It is not pleasant to look at, and when I was there, understanding the tragedy that took place beneath my very feet, and seeing this jagged sculpture of warped black metal, it did not make me feel good. However, that discomfort was intentional. It was designed to do this. It was crafted with precision to elicit that response and emulate the atmosphere of tragedy that it depicted. It was, without overcomplicating things right now, artistic, but not pleasant. The same could be true here with The Last of Us 2. The game could be designed to make us uncomfortable, to make us hate the concept of revenge because that concept led to the demise of characters that we love. And that ultimate goal could be respected if and only if it is executed properly. Here is the prediction I mentioned before, though to be honest it is less of a prediction and more of a desperate hope given how unlikely it is, but how well it might interact with the plot leaks that we have seen thus far. Abby, from what we have seen, is a disgusting character. Even the material seemingly crafted to give her well-rounded emotional appeal is obnoxious and irritating. She is the best at archery, she is the best at fighting, she is queen progressive, bow down to her, for all intent and purposes. However, picture this. Abby brutally murders Joel in her pursuit of vengeance. Eventually, she nearly murders or does murder Ellie, but imagine if this is not the climax. Imagine if Dina, Ellie's lesbian partner, who is pregnant with a child that they hope to raise together at the time, gets spared by Abby, as does Ellie, but she loses the baby. You as the player are forced to play as Abby during all of this and develop even more hatred for her. Now picture Ellie succumbing to that very same feeling of vengeance, hunting down Abby and beating her to death much the same way that Abby has done to Joel. I hope everyone is able to follow where I'm going with this, because despite the ludicrously low probability here, I firmly believe this would be a fitting hypothetical plotline that can explain why I still harbor the faintest hope that they will produce something worthy. We, as the player, having been forced to play as this awful, disgusting character Abby for half the story, as she murders characters we actually do care about, find catharsis here. We have built up to this moment, and we, the player, enjoy the sequence of events leading to the death of Abby, as does Ellie, who we would be playing as at the time. But then, after all this, an entirely separate and completely innocent character emerges for that final frame or segment, whatever it is, and could be a child, an unknown lover, who knows, and we are left with a decisive insinuation that the vengeance cycle will now continue. The player would now be invested actively in this, as Ellie would have been successfully defended and the narrative built upon itself by forcing you to play as Abby to a point where we on the other side of the screen also feel like a part of that revenge cycle, because now Ellie, who we worked hard to protect, is at risk once again as the cycle of revenge rages on. Joel kills the doctors, Abby kills Joel, Abby kills Dina's child, Ellie kills Abby, and now someone, somewhere, is coming for Ellie and Dina once again because we as the player relished the opportunity to hunt down Abby because we hate her so much because of what she's done, and continued the cycle. This is one possible way, in my opinion, to salvage the narrative that we have seen. For some, it might still be terrible and indefensible, but at the very least, it would diverge from tearing down everything that we loved from the previous titles in favor of some new, horribly unlikable and obnoxious protagonist with the goal of subverting expectations. But honestly, how likely is it that all this actually occurs, or that any series of events takes place to salvage what we have seen? Honestly, very unlikely. So with that in mind, why then would the game, if released as is, without some monumental form of greater context, fundamentally changing the overall message when compared to what we have seen already, why then would it be absolutely catastrophic to future games with a similar agenda? The reason is simple. We judge what the character is, not what the character isn't. If there is no bombshell context shakeup and Abby is truly intended to be the new protagonist, learning the lesson that vengeance leads nowhere while trashing everything the fans once loved, players will judge Abby based on her identity. Imagine in 6 months or a year when a male to female transgendered character pops up in a long-standing and beloved franchise. What do these people think the reaction will be? Will we have all forgotten that Abby came in and destroyed something we loved in the most antagonistic and poorly written way possible? Or will we instinctively, whether conscious or subconscious, reject that character on premise based on known experiences? How about taking it one step further? Political agenda fanatics allege that a connection exists between video game content and real-world behavior or prejudice. They have built the entire flawed argument on the fact that only depicting certain demographics and turning them into the defining characters in most franchises will create negative ramifications for those less visible. How then will it turn out when you take those less visible demographics and push them to the front while having them brutally destroy what the widespread existing fanbase loves? If that connection does in fact exist, and their entire movement is predicated on it, by the way, you have just created real-world ramifications from your own decisive action by having these marginalized identities assume the most despicable position you could. You did not take and craft compelling new characters, you had disgustingly written symbolic tokens destroy what the vast majority love, which generates animosity towards future inclusion of anything even remotely similar. Basically, harboring anger towards what you perceive to be your audience's political or social beliefs and turning that animosity into the literal focal point of an artistic creation merely serves to further entrench all of your extremist enemies into the very same positions that you hate by giving them self-serving evidence that they are right for holding those beliefs in the first place. If you craft a transgendered character who is empathetic, strong, disciplined, intelligent, and relatable, the majority of your fanbase will be open to loving them over time. The way that they did with Ellie and Joel. It took time. It took an entire game. If you craft a transgendered character who brutalizes the characters that they love, exemplifies negative stereotypes of anger, aggression, and even mimics current political debate about transgendered sports regulations in the worst possible way, you create a lightning rod example of why future titles who attempt any inclusion at all should be curb-stomped as hard as possible to avoid catastrophe. In effect, if The Last of Us 2 remains as is without some sort of radical context blowout or a full-on delayed rewrite, it will harm the very agendas it seeks to promote in the first place within the gaming industry for years to come, including gay characters or transgender characters or whatever else. That simple act should not be considered controversial because it isn't. But Naughty Dog, Neil Druckmann, Sony, and whoever else is responsible, they are on the precipice of making it even more controversial through sheer unmitigated animosity. That is, if this entire hypothetical is true. There it is. If the game comes out and has more to see, more to know, and there's a reason to support its vision, even if that vision is technically not something that makes me feel good, as art can often do, that's true, I will be open to that outcome. But if it does not, if what we have seen is truly what we get with minimal revelations, it will go down as one of the worst games of all time. Not necessarily from a sales perspective, it will probably still sell fine. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's going to sell fine regardless. But from a social feedback perspective, it might very well go down in history as an origin point for further animosity and polarization while being used as an example of why diverse characters should not be allowed to exist. And that's a truly terrible thing to become. We'll see how it turns out. I maintain that we should keep an open mind, but that's increasingly hard to do. If you want to support Merch, Patreon, Twitter, another gaming YouTuber to check out, please subscribe and support him. If you drink coffee, check out EDC Coffee with the link down below for a discount. And if we as a community order enough, I'll be able to get us our own special blend, which is the end goal. I think I'll call it Categorically Superior Coffee Blend or something. I don't know, but that's it. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.